Is that weird, awkward pause I was talking?
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit. Today we are joined by Matt Bush, who is an applied neurology expert, a founder and chief executive officer of Next Level Neuro. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here.
It's great having you. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Next Level Neuro?
Yeah, absolutely. So Next Level Neuro in this world of applied neurology is kind of the cutting edge of how do we take medical neuroscience and research and put it into the hands of what we call the frontline practitioners, which are the therapists, the coaches, and the trainers of the world. So we're an education company, first and foremost, teaching these health and fitness pros how to use neurology to help their clients get out of pain faster or get better performance in their rehab or in their sport. And it's a very interesting and fascinating world. It's changing quickly. But we're doing this all in the scope of not a lot of medical imaging and not a lot of lab work. What really sets us apart is if you go see a medical neurologist, they're going to take your bloods, they're going to look at medical imaging because they're essentially finding out, is there something I can operate on or medicate?
Right.
And I tell my clients, I'm not going to do surgery on your brain, no matter how much you want me to. We're going to actually look at what your brain is supposed to do. Is it functioning the way that it is intended to? Is it handling its responsibilities? And then when we find any deficits or any contributors to the pain that you might be having, we want to retrain those rather than trying to medicate them. So it's a perspective that everyone can apply. You can do it in your own living room or in your own kitchen while you're waiting on the tea kettle to boil. But the research and the anecdotal experience behind it has shown really amazing changes in people's brain health and overall levels of pain and performance.
And those sort of, you're teaching these people so that they can help their clients. Those clients, what are some of the pains and problems that they're experiencing that this solution is really helping them solve?
Well, the place to start on that question is to go, everybody's got a brain.
Right.
And for us, the most important thing is that everybody learns how to use it. This thing up inside of our head doesn't really come with the user's manual. We don't get taught how to utilize it in school. And even these practitioners, they mostly learn how to train the body from the neck down. They don't learn a lot in their education about how the brain actually controls everything. So it really is any pain that someone is having on a recurring basis. That could be nondescript low back pain, headaches and migraines, ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, even organ pains like digestive issues or breathing difficulties, chest pains. They all fall under the umbrella of pain that's being created by your brain and nervous system for the purpose that we call it's an action signal. It's trying to tell you need to do something different.
And why do you think, I'm just curious, why do you think, you mentioned that, people kind of tend to forget about this section. Why do you think it is overlooked by medical practitioners often?
For a long time, the nervous system and the brain have been viewed as this mystery black box, right? It's never been fully understood. And truth be told, it's still not completely understood. But for a long time, there wasn't the medical technology to understand or to see what's going on in the brain in real time or while someone is still alive. I mean, it's only been since 1999 that we've had the functional MRI machine where we can see brain activity in almost real time. So we've learned more in the last 25 years about how the brain works than we knew in the entirety of human existence before that time.
Wow.
So it's a really new part of the science industry. It's a new part of the medical field. And a lot of times when practitioners or doctors went through their education 15, 20, 30 years ago, the information just wasn't available. So people couldn't learn. They weren't taught because the information didn't exist.
Well, and you mentioned, it's only been since 1999 that we've had sort of the functional MRI. Yeah. It's because it's such, a relatively new field, with this technology. Is there still technology that is advancing in this space? Or, I mean, is it
Yeah.
still an evolving field?
Every single day. Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, new ways of observing and imaging the brain are being developed all the time. New functional assessments are being created by practitioners around the world and researchers. And so we are constantly learning. We're really staying right on the cutting edge of this new information and new technology.
Wow.
What we try to do at Next Level Neuro is take the published research that comes truly out of like the hard sciences, the medical world, and the research fields. And then we take it and go, how do we apply this in the real world with real people who are not in a medical environment? How do we put it on the training floor of the gym? Or how do we put it in a yoga studio so that those trainers and therapists who are working with people 1, 2, 3 times per week have these tools in their hand?
Yeah. And, I mean, I'd love to dive deeper into that. I mean, this might be a big loaded question, but what are some of the strategies that you're using to sort of make these, strategies more accessible to the people who need them most?
Yeah, well, it essentially comes down to an assessment process first that the practitioner can learn,
Mm,
like a series of tests, right? So we might test your eyes and your visual system, like not the clarity, that would be for an optometrist, but how do your eyes move? How do they work as a team? How do they
mm,
track an object through space or switch between different targets? We would test and assess your vestibular system, which is your inner ear. That contributes to your sense of balance and equilibrium.
mm,
We would assess your breathing, like your breathing rhythm, your breathing mechanics of how the lungs and the rib cage actually move, the way that your body exchanges oxygen and carbon dioxide. And we would assess your actual movement quality. So, how is your coordination? Where do you compensate? Maybe because of previous injuries or pain that you have. And all of that is within the context of, when we look at this a little bit more philosophically, the brain's number one job is your survival.
mm.
And there's this really interesting reframe that we teach all of our practitioners, that when someone's having pain, or anxiety, fear, uncertainty, hesitation, those kind of all go under the same umbrella. And the client says, "Oh, my body's working against me," or "My body's broken," or "My brain is broken. It's giving me anxiety and giving me pain all the time." You go, no, 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 no. Your brain is doing exactly what it's meant to do. It's exactly what it's wired to do. It's keeping you safe.
Mm,
And so, where we connect the dots between this survival perspective that the brain has built into it and all of these assessments and training tools, is this idea that whenever the brain detects ongoing threat of any kind, physical threat, emotional threat, cognitive threat, visual threat, breathing threat, like anything that's happening where it perceives threat, it's going to hit the brakes and slow you down or limit your performance or
right,
even give you pain. That's the
right,
action signal part of it, right? It's like waving a big red flag and going, "Hey, pay attention. I need
right,
you to stop doing what you're doing or do something different, because if this continues, bad stuff is going to happen."
right.
And so our job as practitioners is to understand where might the nervous system be perceiving threat, and then help to lower that threat by retraining the neurological systems that are involved.
Mm. And it's pretty incredible when you stop and think about, all of these complex systems that are working in tandem to keep you alive and functioning. And
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people stop and break that down often.
No,
Uh,
we generally take it for granted.
right.
That's the
And
part about, even practitioners learn about the body from the neck down, because they learn about muscles and joints and connective tissue and how our movement patterns should work. But they don't learn about, say, how our visual eye movement affects our physical body posture, our movement through space, and even our pain levels.
yeah, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about that pain. We had spoken a little bit about that previously. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about this sort of myth that pain equals injury and injury equals pain, and why most people hold that to be true when it's not?
Absolutely. I think that's just what's called collective wisdom that's not necessarily true. It's been passed on generation to generation that if something hurts, it must be injured. And that's not actually the case. So we view pain as that action signal, and that's really the way to best define the reason why the brain creates pain is it's trying to send a signal. And the split here, how you can differentiate these is if you go to Google or ChatGPT and you ask about the number or the percentage of what are called asymptomatic orthopedic injuries found in the general public. And you can find research studies on high-level athletes, but also on the general population. Asymptomatic means someone's not having any symptoms at all. There's no pain, there's no movement deficit. But an orthopedic injury is an injury to the tissues that could be seen on X-ray or MRI. Okay. So they've done the research studies where they bring in a group of people from the general population. They say, hey, you guys are not having any pain. You're not having any movement problems, but we're going to put you in an MRI machine and we're going to see what injuries we can find in your body that if you were having pain and we saw them on an MRI, we would recommend surgery. Okay. The percentages, depending on what body part you look at, are that 50% to 80% of people in the general population have these injuries inside their body, but they're not feeling any pain on a day-to-day level.
Wow.
So it becomes a bit of a head scratcher because you're like, wait a second, 80% of people are walking around with a bulging disc or a torn rotator cuff in their shoulder, but they don't even know that it's there. Like they don't feel it on a cognitive level. They're not aware of it. Yeah, exactly. So how is it that if pain and injury were the same thing, how could these people have this massive frequency of injury but not be experiencing any pain? Everybody's pain meter is suddenly broken. You know, so we can differentiate the two concepts.
Right.
And then when you flip them and look at it the other way, you go, hey, have you ever had pain when you were facing a stressful situation? Like you're about to go into a meeting with the boss, or you're about to go into a really hard conversation with your partner, and suddenly you get a headache, or you get stomach pain, or you get low back pain. Like, did you ever call out of taking a test? Like, oh, I have a stomach ache. I can't take the test.
Right.
You know? So in the face of threat or potential threat, our nervous system has the ability to generate pain in order to prevent us from engaging in whatever that activity might be.
Wow.
It's protecting us essentially. Okay. So then in that case, we have pain, but we have no injury. So we have multiple examples where these are indeed not the same thing. They need to be disconnected. And we need to understand that just because my brain is giving me pain or anxiety doesn't mean that something's actually broken. It's more that my brain is looking for attention or a solution to a problem that it perceives, real or imagined, by the way. Okay, not always a real threat that the brain is responding to. It can be a perceived threat. But this is something that I believe everybody needs to understand. Practitioners, clients, business owners, employees, team leaders, everybody in our world needs to know pain is not something that automatically equals injury. It's something that says your brain is asking for help.
Right. And I mean, this is such a great conversation. I noticed right off the bat that something that you are extremely talented at is taking these sort of abstract, complex concepts and really making them approachable and understandable for even an idiot like me. So I imagine that in your, day to day, I mean, is that a big part of the job too, is sort of making these complex notions and ideas and kind of more abstract thoughts about the mind and mental capacity understandable? And what are some of the strategies you do to make them approachable for the average Joe?
Yeah, it is a really big part of our education process because, like I said, people have kind of thought for years the brain is this black box. Like it's complicated, it's hard to learn, it seems very random. Even the terminology is like learning another language. And so we do have to try to make the complex more simple. So we use a lot of analogies when we do that. We use a lot of real world examples. And we pull on the research, like I mentioned earlier, but we have to translate that into a story or analogy that anyone can understand, right?
Right.
Like the pain idea, just briefly,
Yeah.
we use an analogy of a what's called a threat bucket. Imagine a metal farm pail, right? Like 1920s farm bucket, made of tin metal with a handle on top. That represents your brain, and every threat that your brain detects is putting a little bit of water in the bucket.
Mm.
Okay, so you have a certain capacity of how much threat your brain can deal with before it's going to get overloaded. And what your brain believes about threat is if the threat is overwhelming, basically the threat's going to kill me.
Right.
Like that's the brain's subconscious belief. So if the bucket were to ever fill up all the way and start to overflow, we would have a full-blown fight, flight, or freeze response, like physiological fight or flight response. We would punch someone in the face, like by losing all self-control and just react at an instinctual level, or we would literally physically run away, or we would freeze, just like an animal that you come across. And the brain does not want that to happen, because a true fight or flight response means you're in a life or death situation.
Right.
It only has to make one mistake and survival is not guaranteed.
Mm.
So the way this analogy works, here's what makes the bucket kind of unique, is if you imagine about an inch beneath the top of the bucket, there's a little threshold, like a dotted line drawn on the outside of the bucket, and there's a little spout sticking out of the side of it. So when the water reaches up to a certain level and it hits that threshold, some of that water is going to overflow out the side of the bucket. That is a collection of protective mechanisms that our brain will enact.
Wow.
And so the action signals. So that's where pain comes from. That's where anxiety comes from. That's immobility. That's inflexibility. That's tension and stiffness in our body. It's cognitive brain fog. It's procrastination. Those are all protective mechanisms, things that our brain will construct and utilize, trying to A, get our attention, and B, keep us safe. So if we can just lower the level of threat in the bucket, what happens to all of those outputs? You tell me.
Right. They won't reach that level, right? They won't
don't reach that level, and the outputs go away.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to understand how do I get rid of my pain, we just have to lower the threat level. How do I reduce my anxiety? Lower the threat level. How do I lower my stress? Lower the threat level. And here's what people have not been taught before. The threat level is not only due to external circumstances. It's not just I have a stressful job and a stressful family and a stressful house. Maybe, but in many cases, maybe not.
Right.
And for many years, there was a perspective that all pain was physiological. It was coming from the body. Like there must be an injury. We talked about that. Then there became a big pendulum swing that said all pain is emotional. Maybe it's psychosomatic. Maybe it's driven by held emotions or previous trauma. But there's got to be an emotional driver to pain. And as the pendulum goes back and forth for people where they're searching for an answer, the way I describe it is that right here in the middle, what they're skipping over as they ping pong back and forth is the nervous system. Because there can be threat in your threat bucket because your nervous system is not working the way it's supposed to. Like you have a visual problem, you have a balance problem, you have a movement problem, you have a breathing problem, or you have a fuel problem, not, the fuel that the brain needs to run on. And so you can go down the rabbit hole of working with doctors and physical therapists and movement coaches ad nauseum and still have pain.
Right.
You can work with a therapist and a trauma specialist and a healer on the emotional side of things and still have pain. But when you start to actually address the nervous system and understand that it could be putting 3/4 of the bucket already full of water because the nervous system itself is not working efficiently, then of course it makes sense that the one little physical thing or the one little emotional thing is enough to fill up your bucket.
Right.
and then it overflows,
Right.
right? When we go back to the nervous system itself, it is much easier to lower that threat level and reduce pain, anxiety, procrastination, all of these protective mechanisms that we run into.
Yeah, I mean, these metaphors and analogies you're using are absolutely fantastic. I'm loving it. I'm curious, can you define for our listeners this concept of neuroplasticity?
Oh yeah. It's one of the most important concepts that we talk about. That the depth of neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change,
Mm,
both in its function, so meaning a single brain area, whether that's a neural pathway or a part of your brain, like a region of brain tissue, it can learn to do something new or different. So it can
mm,
change its function, but the brain also has the ability to change its structure. So more neural pathways can be grown or developed.
wow.
More neurons can be produced. Okay. There's this old misunderstanding that once we're about age 22 to 25, our brain becomes fixed and it doesn't change anymore. That's not true. Neuroplasticity actually continues until the day that you die, which
Wow.
is, it's one of the coolest things about neurology in general, because the message becomes, if you're not dead, you're not done changing. You're not stuck,
Mm,
right? So if the brain has the ability to change when provided the right stimulus, you're never stuck in the reality or in the mold that you currently are experiencing. You can change it.
yeah.
You can change how your brain functions. You can change literally how your brain is wired.
And I mean, what are some of I mean, again, this is going to be another big loaded question, but this is
Yeah.
so interesting. What are some of the strategies that you're using to sort of hack that neuroplasticity to reduce anxiety, to reduce stress, pain, any of
Yeah.
those elements, those problem things that people are experiencing?
Yeah. So where we start with people is that there's, from our experience over the last 20 years, there's a group of what we call the high payoff exercises.
Mm,
Okay, so imagine you had gone to a physical therapist and they gave you some homework to do, right? If you went in with a shoulder problem or a hip issue, they're going to give you a little printed sheet and say, I want you to do these 5 exercises 3 times a day. Very similar here, that when we go through an assessment with someone, or if they watch one of our programs and they learn the high payoff drills, we're
yeah.
going to say, here's your 5 exercises. I want you to practice these 3 to 5 times per day. And to do 5 exercises is probably going to take you like 3 minutes.
Right.
Okay. They're very quick and very easy. You can do them at home. There's no fancy equipment required. But what this does, when you look at the research on neuroplasticity and what it takes for the brain to change, it requires repetition and intensity,
Mm,
as well as a little bit of concentration. Okay. And so when they research what is the best recipe for neuroplastic change, how do we make it happen most efficiently or most successfully? They compared a group of different research cohorts, and one group did 20 minutes of training first thing in the morning. One group did training about every other day, so one day on, one day of rest. One group did 5 periods of repetition each day with 0 days off.
wow.
The collective training time for each group was the same, 20
Mhm.
minutes per day. Okay. But the group that repeated 5 times a day had much better neuroplasticity than the every other day or the 20 minutes once a day, because the repetition is what was important. So
Right.
it's like we're sending the brain a message through these exercises, or showing it how it should be working. And then we're repeating that every few hours. So it's like a little reminder,
Right.
just like if you set a reminder on your watch or your phone to drink water. I got to drink
Right.
my water during the day. It's going to go off every few hours. Same thing for neuro exercises. Little
Yeah.
bit of repetition, 3 minutes at a time, 4 to 5 times a day. And within 1 to 2 weeks, people start to notice significant changes. After 3 months, often you don't recognize how your brain is actually working because there's been so much
Right.
change.
Yeah, that's because I think about it like playing an instrument. You just have to practice it, right?
Exactly.
When
Absolutely.
when you think back on all the people that you have been able to help through Next Level Neuro, all of the either the businesses you've trained to teach this or the people you've helped directly, is there a story that stands out in your mind of either an individual or a business that you really saw a positive transformation in as a result of your help and guidance? And if so, would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, of course. We can do both if we have time. The individual comes to mind first, actually. There was a young lady who contacted us. She was 20 years old at the time. She was in chronic back pain because 5 years previous, she had had a surgery for scoliosis where they put titanium rods down both sides of her spine. Okay. So she had developed what was called idiopathic adolescent scoliosis. Idiopathic means they don't know where it comes from. Adolescent means it develops during the adolescent or teenage years, most commonly. And while that's the label for the diagnosis, our perspective within applied neurology is that that type of scoliosis comes from a mismatch between your visual system that's trying to see the world and your inner ear that's trying to maintain your balance.
Wow.
And when they have a mismatch and they start to compete with one another, what ends up happening is it's like two older siblings who are fighting and they take it out on the younger sibling, which is the body, and they contort the body into an odd twisted posture that then starts to become more permanent skeletal change in the spine. Okay.
Yeah.
So scoliosis is driven by a functional deficit or a functional problem. It's not genetic. It's not inherited. It's not an injury. It's just an ongoing functional problem that causes this adaptation to occur. But the doctors don't view it that way. The doctors say it's a problem. We should fix it with surgery.
Right.
So they go in and they set the titanium rods by putting screws into multiple vertebrae inside this young lady's back. She goes through months of healing and rehab. And after going through the surgery, her pain was worse than before she went in. So for 5 years, she was more or less bedridden every day. And so she had heard about us, someone, I don't recall who it was at the moment, but contacted us and said, "Hey, do you guys think you can help?" And I remember sitting on the very first Zoom call with her because we do about 99% of our work over Zoom. And I said, "I want to try something. Has anyone ever looked at the scar from your surgery? Like where they actually had to cut your skin open and make space for these rods?" And she had, years of physical therapy, right? She said, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?"
Right.
Like, well, that's a no, right? No one's even addressed it. And the reason I went there is that the scars in our skin are highly neurologically active. So even if the surgery had been successful along the spine itself, these scars that ran the entire length of her back could still be putting threat in the threat bucket.
Right.
Right. So it's at least a possibility that all of her recurring and chronic pain is not coming from the spine itself, but possibly coming from the skin and the fascial tissue and the muscle tissue that had to be cut through to perform the surgery. And so I had her start with something really simple by just rubbing a cloth on her scar. Actually, her mom was actually sitting next to her. So she grabbed a washcloth. She just rubbed the cloth on her skin. And after about 60 seconds, just kind of sitting there, she had her eyes closed. She kind of sat up a little taller. She opened her eyes. She's like, "What just happened?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "My pain is gone."
Wow.
Like, "What did you do to me?" Like, I didn't do anything. I'm on the other side of Zoom. That's the power of your nervous system.
Wow.
So we worked with her for about 6 months on a weekly basis.
That's
Took
incredible.
her through not only rehab for the scar, but for her vision and her vestibular system, which had significant issues that we were able to identify and then retrain. And she, about 3 months into it, she was pain-free, back to work, back to school. She completed her university degree a couple years later, got married. So she's running around the state of Georgia somewhere at this point, enjoying life.
That's incredible.
You know?
And you
So
think somebody, I was going to say, and you think somebody would have thought of that prior, but
you would
there you
think,
are.
but her doctors had essentially written her off and said,
Wow.
you're going to be in chronic pain the rest of your life. So, we're going to give you pain medications and muscle relaxers, and you just have to learn to live with it.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So we tell that story because we truly believe that neuroplasticity and neuroscience is really the science of hope. It's the science that says something can change.
I love
it doesn't have to stay the way that it is right now.
That's amazing. Matt, this has been an absolutely incredible conversation. Really interesting topics. I'd love to have you on the show again to discuss this more. If anybody out there listening could use your help and guidance, could use the help of Next Level Neuro, where can people find you?
Yeah, we're on Instagram. That's probably the easiest place to find us. Our handle is at Next Level Neuro. It's all one word. And if you want to check us out on the web, it's www.nextlevelneuro.com.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. This was an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here. Blessings to you guys.
And thank you everyone for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Matt, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.